Hello my fiendish friends. Do you know the difference between the devil and Satan and Lucifer and Beelzebub and Mephistopheles and the Antichrist and the Prince of Darkness? They are not the same. Why are there so many names for the devil? Why is he depicted in a red cape with horns and a pitchfork? Why do we say speak of the devil? And what the Dickens does what the Dickens mean? And what is a Faustian pact? This video is about names for the devil and their origins, and I think I'm the ideal person to make the video because, well, I'm not the devil, but I am left-handed. The left-hand side is associated with the devil. The devil is said to have baptized his followers with his left hand. The word sinister in English is from the Latin sinister, meaning left, on the left side. Left in Italian is sinistra. This video is about evil, but I promise it'll be good, so stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Let Them Talk. By the way guys, I'm not a biblical scholar, even though my name's Gideon and there is a Bible named after me. Yes, the Gideon Bible. Now this is a video about words and expressions, what they mean and where they come from. So if there are any theological inexactitudes, don't damn me to hell. Anyway, with that in mind, let's start with the Old Testament and Satan. In the Old Testament, the devil is something of a bit player. In fact, the word devil doesn't appear in the Old Testament at all. What we do get is ha-satan, which is Hebrew and means the adversary or the accuser. It's more of a job description than a personification of evil, just as the marketing manager might be Mr. Spigot one month and Miss Delaney the next. The Satan is a role that can change. He's something like an obstructing angel sent by God to challenge or test humans. For example, in the book of Job, God allows a Satan, one of his divine courtiers, to test Job's faith. He acts on God's behalf, not in rebellion. He's not a fallen angel. The devil. While Satan comes from Hebrew, the devil comes from the Greek diabolos, and both mean essentially the same thing, accuser or slanderer. However, in the New Testament, the devil is portrayed as a fallen angel, as Jesus says in Luke 10:18. I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. There are also references to the devil as an evil spirit or demon, but what he is not is the ruler of a fiery underworld. If anything, that authority belongs to Christ. In Revelation 1:18, Jesus declares, I have the keys of death and of Hades, Hades being hell. So devils and Satans are found throughout the Bible, but the one evil character, the arch enemy of God that we know and hate, is not present. Theologians have interpreted that the serpent in the Garden of Eden as the devil, but it is never explicitly called that in the Bible. If you're finding this video devilishly good, then do subscribe and sign up to my newsletter, The Rambler. It's all about the history of the English language. It's free, link in the description. The Antichrist. The Antichrist or Antichrists are mentioned in the New Testament. Antichrists come from the Greek anti and Christos, meaning against the anointed one. Translations into English vary, but it's roughly equivalent to a false messiah or opponent of Christ. The Antichrist isn't the devil, nor is it a single entity. According to Christian teaching, there is only one Jesus, the Saviour, the Messiah, but those who claim to be the Messiah instead of Jesus are Antichrists, or false messiahs. Martin Luther and many early Protestants, and indeed some extreme Protestant groups to this day, believe that the Pope and the Catholic Church are the Antichrist prophesied in the Bible. Beelzebub. Beelzebub does appear in the Old Testament. It appears in the Book of Kings, and in Hebrew, Baal-zebub means Lord of the Flies. Yes, that's right. If you've ever read the book by William Golding, and I read it at school, and believe it or not, I finally understand why it's called Lord of the Flies many decades later while doing research for this video. In the Bible, it is the name given to the god worshipped in the Philistine city of Ekron. Theologians have interpreted it as another name for the devil, Lucifer. Did you know that a slang term for a match, the match you light a cigarette with, is a lucifer? And in Dutch, matches are known as lucifers. But why? Who is Lucifer and what's the match connection? Lucifer is only mentioned once in the Bible, in the book of Isaiah in the Old Testament. And here he is not an adversary, an accuser, or any bad actor. That comes later. But this is the quote from the King James Version of the Bible. "How art thou? Fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. How art thou? Cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations." Here Isaiah is speaking of the king of Babylon. He is mocking him. The once mighty king of Babylon is an arrogant leader of an empire who invades his neighbours. He seems unstoppable, but ultimately fails, and I guess he's like a biblical Putin. And Isaiah is taking the piss. He calls him the son of the morning, also known as the morning star, also known as Venus. And Venus is the first star seen in the evening and the last star you see when the sun rises before falling below the horizon to the underworld. And it's a metaphor for short-lived glory followed by downfall. Later theologians who studied other religious works, including the Book of Enoch, which is not in the Bible but was nonetheless an important text among early Christians, drew parallels with the fallen angel and the devils in the Book of Enoch, and the Lucifer reference to Venus in the book of Isaiah. I hope you're following. By the way, the name Lucifer was not associated with evil amongst early Christians. In fact, there is Saint Lucifer of Cagliari in the 4th century. What has this all got to do with matches? Lucifer in Latin literally means bringer of light, and in Greek that would be phosphorus, and early matches contained phosphorus. So the big question is, if the devil is not the devil in the Bible, where does he come from?
Here, my ice lolly's melted. You really must be the devil.
Incarnate. How do you do?
Oh, how do you do?
St. Augustine, writing in the 4th century AD, was the first Christian theologian to divide up the angels, the light, the good angels, and those angels who turned away from the light of righteousness, the dark angels. Chief among these fallen angels was the devil, or Lucifer, or Satan. Augustine says that it was the sin of pride that caused the first angel to turn away from God and becomes the devil. That famous image of the devil, red skin, horns, tall pitchfork, where does that come from? Well, it's not in the Bible. The image of the devil evolved over the centuries, borrowing from bits and pieces from other deities and mythical characters. The horns and the tail are from the ancient Greek god Pan, the god of the wild. The pitchfork from Poseidon, god of the sea. The red signifies the fire of hell. Red for anger, red for passion, red for sin, red for burn baby burn, disco inferno. The cape is more recent and comes from early 19th century theatrical depictions of the devil in the play Faust by Goethe. More about that in a moment. Over the course of many centuries, writers have fleshed out the appearance and the character of the devil. In the early medieval period, the devil was portrayed as a grotesque, monstrous figure. Dante, in the Divine Comedies of 1321, narrates the 9 circles of hell for different categories of sinners. Flatterers, wallowing in excrement. The violent, boiling in rivers of blood. The lustful, swept by violent windstorms. And the greedy, rolling heavy weights. The suicidal, turned into thorny trees, fed upon by hideous clawed birds. Tech billionaires forced to watch AI slop for the rest of eternity while eating baked beans on toast. Okay, I made up the last one. Satan becomes cool. In John Milton's Paradise Lost, 1667, we have a more ambiguous character. Satan is a bold religious figure, and Milton was criticised for what many perceived was his sympathy for the devil. The infernal serpent, whose guile stirred up with envy and revenge. The mother of mankind had cast him out from heaven with all his host of rebel angels. From Milton's time onwards, we see a more sympathetic depiction of the devil in literature, including in a number of works by Lord Byron, who borrowed heavily from Milton. And this is a quote from Lord Byron's play Cain, a Mystery from 1821. He talks about Lucifer and describes his fight with God. I battle it against him as I battled in highest heaven through all eternity and the unfathomable gulfs of Hades and the interminable realms of space and the infinity of endless ages. The next geezer on our list is Mephistopheles, also known as Mephisto, and it comes to us through German folklore. Remember, I mentioned earlier that Lucifer meant bringer of light and that the word in Greek was phosphorus. Well, Mephistopheles means not a lover of light. You can probably recognise the philos, the lover part, from words like bibliophile, a lover of books, anglophile, a lover of English, and Philadelphia, meaning brotherly love, and Nephetophile, a lover of clouds. Mephistopheles isn't the devil himself, but rather, according to some version, he is the devil's representative on earth. Mephistopheles is most closely associated with the tale of Faust. Johann Georg Faust was an actual person living somewhere between 1480 to 1466 until 1541. And there are various accounts of the tale in books, in movies, dramas and plays, including the play by Christopher Marlowe, but the most famous is Goethe's version of the tale. Goethe lived from 1749 to 1832, and it took him a long time to write Mephistopheles, and it was published posthumously in 1832. In fact, it took him over 60 years to write the play. Poor Goethe. These days you can get AI to write a book in 3 minutes. Would have saved him a lot of time. The full version of the play lasts 13 hours. It's about Faust, who's living a wretched life, No money, no power, and unfulfilled in love. His life is meaningless. But then Mephistopheles steps in and says that he can have whatever he wants in this life, great riches, power and love, if he'll sign on the dotted line, in blood of course, which he does. Mephistopheles is the devil's henchman, or perhaps his lawyer, and what Faust's sign is known as a Faustian pact. Faust was not the last to sell his soul to the devil, or so they say. The violin performances of Paganini were so remarkable that some believed that only someone possessed by the devil could have such a talent. Blues guitarist Robert Johnson once was a mediocre, guitarist, but almost overnight he became one of the greatest blues guitarists in history, and legend has it that he met the devil at a Mississippi crossroads at midnight, where he sold his soul. He even sang about this diabolic encounter in his songs. Sadly, Johnson died at the age of 27. His cause of death is uncertain. Some say he was murdered by a jealous husband of a woman he was flirting with. Now, if you're considering selling your soul to the devil, personally, I'd recommend against it. I mean, you may get some short-term benefits on earth, but that's nothing compared to damnation in the bowels of hell for all eternity, which I think is a long time. We'll move on to some expressions and some nicknames of the devil. So we have the idiom, speak of the devil. The long version is speak of the devil and the devil will come. Today we use it when somebody we're talking about enters the room at that very moment. We've used it this way for hundreds of years, but originally it was said as a warning that mentioning the devil by name would invoke his appearance and his evilness, which will spoil your day. Now, this is a quote from an Italian book of Proverbs from 1666. The English say, talk of the devil, and he is presently at your elbow. If you can't mention the devil by name, then what are you supposed to do? Well, you give him a nickname. Just like nowadays, many people use what are referred to as minced oaths in place of the names of God, and blasphemies, especially in American English, but sometimes in British English too. So you'll hear some people say gosh instead of God, and darn instead of damn, and call blimey. That's a British one, by the way. Well, in the 16th, 17th centuries and later, we start to get a lot of these, but not about God, but about the devil, whose name you're not meant to mention. And so that is to say, we talk about the devil without actually using his name. And some are still known today. So you get Old Nick, Old Scratch, which comes from a Middle English word scrat, meaning a demon or a goblin. In modern German, Schrat means forest demon. And you have the Prince of Darkness, the evil one. And as an exclamation of surprise, you might hear, what the dickens? Of course, it sounds a bit old-fashioned nowadays. People are more likely to say, what the hell, or what the fuck. But it's still used sometimes by a few people. But why Dickens? Dickens is a name which sounds a little bit like devil. Devil Dickens, maybe. But different enough. So what the Dickens was used by many writers, including Shakespeare in The Merry Wives of Windsor. I cannot tell what the Dickens his name is. And you may have heard what the deuce first recorded as a minced oath in 1710. And like Dickens, it probably just sounds a bit like the devil, but not too much like the actual word. So deuce isn't important really, but it's just probably comes from like Old French for two, deux, modern French is deux, or the Old French word for God, Deus. The modern French is Dieu. So an accuser, a fallen angel, a false messiah, a slanderer, the bringer of light, a rebel, the lord of the flies, a proud and deceitful villain, the arch enemy of God, the personification of evil, or a misunderstood alpha male on an eternal bender with a heavy rock soundtrack. Now you know that these words are not interchangeable, and you can get into serious hot water with you know who if you mix them up. By the way, you can support the channel and get exclusive content by becoming a Patreon, link in the description. Be good. Ciao.